Hello, everyone. We're back, and this will hopefully go up either on Halloween or even a little bit before Halloween. We're joined by Bulge. Hi, Bulge.
Hello, everyone, and hello, Doc. Glad to be
Bulge.
back.
Bulge. This is audio only, but right now Bulge is upside down. Um,
Yes, we don't know why my
yeah.
Zoom camera decided to do this. My computer is not upside down, but I am hanging from the ceiling, or so it appears on the camera.
Well, you and Kiefer Sutherland are known for hanging from the ceiling. Anyhow, that was a very as obscure reference to Lost Boys. I don't know.
Been a
Yeah,
while since,
it's
since
a
I've
good
seen that
movie.
one.
It's a good movie. Yeah, no, I think it's because you're in the Southern Hemisphere, but that's just me. Everything's
Hmm.
upside down, everything's
Yeah,
topsy-turvy.
it's like Australia.
Yeah, for real, for
It's
real.
all upside down over there.
Today, so this is obviously we run pretty fast and loose around here. That's my prerogative, and you jive well with that. So maybe it's because you're Brazilian, and you
Might
guys
be,
are
might be.
just you're up at all hours. You're I don't know. You're drinking caipirinhas. You're doing whatever it
Hmm.
is. You're doing jujitsu. Yeah, I don't know. Stuff is happening. You're banning Twitter. You're unbanning Twitter. I don't really know the current state of that, or if the entire country
Unbanned,
of
unbanned
unbanned.
stuff
Yeah,
at the moment.
at the moment, it can be taken. That privilege can be taken away at any moment.
I do think a lot of the battle between Elon Musk and our government has been on the prediction that Biden would win. And very soon after Kamala stepped up,
Yeah.
there were some background deals or backroom deals going on, and X was mysteriously unbanned from Brazil.
Yes. As this is just yes, circulation of elites is a real thing, and yes,
Hmm.
people are freaking. Yeah, tides are maybe changing. Knock on some wood. Speaking on knocking on wood, and let's say spooky magic enchantedness.
Hmm.
I had this idea for for a little bit here, and I was trying to prioritize our more concrete and more exciting, probably for you as a guest topics. But you're very kind in coming on. I know it's later there for you and talking about so this is going to be even more conceptual, let's say, than it normally is for us. Um, Anyone who's listened to any of my episodes here, hello and welcome, dear listeners, and anyone who has heard me, particularly on Scarlet Thread Society, part of the again, I will shill them because we're trying to expand the Scarlet Thread Society. Everyone should check out. It's part of the Timeline Earth family of podcasts. It's run by One Pause, the Grand Magus, and it's the explicitly woo, paranormal, weird, strange, magical kind of podcast. As I've said many times there, all words are very magic, quote unquote, magical. We are logocentric beings. We are created by the logos to do talking, and we should do good talking. But we do not always do good talking. And so, kind of like just staring off into space one day, I got some ideas about doing an episode wherein, because I know that Bulge has a host of languages at his fingertips, and they're not the same ones that I have at my fingertips, with the obvious exception of English. Otherwise, we couldn't talk to each other.
Host of two,
Well,
and
yeah,
some
but
familiarity with French and Spanish.
yeah,
But
yeah, but
aside from that,
because you're a romance speaker, you're a native speaker of romance, and romance languages
yeah,
have a
I can look at Italian at a
yeah,
sentence in Italian,
you
which
can
I
kind of
have,
vibe. You can
and
vibe,
translate a
yeah.
little bit of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's this weird thing where, I think most of our audience is native English speaker, or at least English, speaks English well. English speakers have a hard time of this because while our language is Germanic, it is the weirdest of the Germanic languages, and as such, it's not like you can look at German if you only speak English and quote unquote figure it out. You
Hmm.
oftentimes can't. Now, obviously, I can because I speak German and I'm here to hopefully guide people through this, but we're going to be looking at various words for blessing and cursing today.
Hmm.
I do think it's interesting to see how different languages and different cultures over time have conceived of words for blessing and words for cursing. And so, thanks for being along for the ride, Bulge. I think
Very
this will
happy
be
to be
great.
here.
You got your siglet. I got my
I got a cigarette and a Diet Coke.
and a
It's what
Diet
I
Coke. You're
have.
going full. Wow. Yeah, full Brazilians never sleep.
Yeah,
I have a creamy Chardonnay, so that shows you how from
that's also
Napa,
very, very
Napa
good.
Valley. So it's the one of the few good things from California is their wines.
Hmm.
Um, so I've, we'll see. Like this is very open-ended. I have things that I think are interesting. You certainly have things that you think are interesting. We'll give and we'll take. We'll be logo-centric and we'll have a good dialogue and hopefully at the bare minimum, I mean, we're talking about it's a spooky time of year, and so we're talking about spookiness. Words having power, having the ability to bless or to curse someone. So I guess we can start with English, maybe not to be Anglo-centric, but just because I think it's the language
Hmm.
so it's the language of the podcast. It's the language we share, and it is the language that I think most people
It's
on
also the
YouTube.
one I didn't research. I researched for
Oh, you
Portuguese, so I'm
didn't.
actually
Very cool. No,
curious.
that's actually good. That's actually good. I think I could have planned this better, but you did it for me, and I appreciate that. You intuited the correct path. Um, So one of my all-time so let's start with we'll start with the spooky and we'll go to the happy. We'll start with cursing.
Hmm.
Curse is in English, the actual word curse has a very interesting etymology. What is etymology first off? I'm not saying entomology, that's the study of bugs, which is
Hmm.
also cool, but I'm not an expert on entomology. Bugs do kind of freak me out a little bit. Etymology is essentially the study of word histories and how words themselves change over time, but also notably how word meanings change over time. So it's not just that words change over time, that totally happens. Their sounds, their structure, but also meanings can. Sometimes they don't have to, but oftentimes they can change over time. Interestingly, the word curse has not really changed too much in
Hmm.
its history in English, and that's nice. Um, this will be audio only, and I might put slides up, I might not put slides up. In an effort to put this up before Halloween, I probably won't. So I'll just explain things. People can all go online and check this out. So in Old English, the oldest recorded version of English, if you want to think about an example of this language, you can think of Beowulf was written down in Old English. In this word, I do not believe appears in Beowulf, but it does appear in sort of the corpus, the entirety of all
Hmm.
Old English written texts that we have that are still surviving. The word kurs, Curs, is attested. So it's a different spelling, and it's kurs. We say curse now, or kus if you're in England. Fred's not here today, so I can make fun of the English all I want to. By the way, if people haven't seen it yet, please do check out our Screw Tape Proposes a Toast episode. It is timely for Halloween and for the U.S. election. So
It's a
it's
great short story too, so read it and go and
yep,
watch it.
yep. So curse is fascinating because it is actually not originally an English word. It's been in the English
Mm.
language ever since the Old English period. So for let's say probably at least 11, if not 1200
1200?
years,
Yeah,
something
I
like
bet
1200
because
years.
Beowulf is 1200 years old or something.
Yeah, something like that.
The
Yeah.
oldest surviving copy, at least, I think.
But curse itself is not originally English. It's from Latin. It's a Latinate
Mm.
loan. And so it's interesting because so since we're talking about word history, I'll drop some knowledge on people because it is something I do. Most of our loan words in English, so a lot of English words are not originally English. They are now, but a lot of the words in English have been borrowed and they've really never been given back. So they've been taken, let's say,
Hmm.
from Latin. But a lot of our Latin loans in English are not they're not directly from Latin. They're from Latin via
French?
Norman French,
French. Okay,
which
yeah.
is an extinct variety of French that's not even
Yes.
if you go to Normandy today, Normandy people
You
do
will
not speak Norman.
you will
That
not find it. Yeah.
they speak Norman dialect of French, but that's not the same thing as like
Norman French.
Norman French that like the Normans that came in and invaded and took over parts of England and Ireland. Those are that's not the same thing. So it's this archaic French. Um, French descends from Romance, as does your native language, Portuguese.
Hmm.
And Romance itself descends from Latin. So it's not that French and Spanish and Portuguese and Romanian quote unquote come from Latin. That's a misnomer. They come from Romance, which is a whole other
Thing.
messiness there, which comes
Uh-huh.
out of vulgar Latin, which was never the same thing as what the elites were speaking or writing. It
Hmm.
is always its own thing, related to but different, notably different. So it come out of quote unquote Romance. So most of English's Romance words are actually from French. But curse is so early. It's such an early loan into the English language. It's before the Norman invasion. And so it just looks a little different, and it's pronounced a little different too, which is kind of fun. It's so we have two versions of this word in our language, and I'll in a few seconds I'll let you know what the other one is. We have one that's the curse word, which is a really early loan from Latin, and it's like witches casting spells against people. Ah, I'm cursed. Yeah, think of Harry Potter, that kind of curse. We also have the word again, but borrowed in from French later. And this is all English is
Mhm.
notable for this, where oftentimes we'll have like the same word twice, but from two different languages. Just
Mm.
English is this probably does happen in Portuguese, but I want to say that English is sort of unique, and English is somewhat unique in this, that we have like doublets, pairs of similar but different versions of the same word that we got from two different sources. It's very weird,
It is the weirdest language I've ever
bizarre.
like even dabbled with. Because
Yeah,
the only other languages I've dabbled with have been Spanish and French, really.
which are
So
probably easier
English
for
is
you.
oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I can read Spanish. It's really just listening and talking that's the problem. I've read
Yeah,
like whole short stories in Spanish.
yeah,
It's not hard.
yeah.
It really is the talking. So, but but English, I learned it from a young age, which is why I speak the way I
You
do.
speak it very well, very well,
But whenever
impressively well.
but whenever I like really take a step back and look at English, because I love the English language, really. I think this is a very weird language, man. Like this is a bizarre little language from this little island of the world, and
Yeah.
it's impressive as hell. I mean, I love what the English language can do, especially in poetry. I tend to like a lot of English poets more than romance poets. Not
Oh,
my
interesting.
favorite poet is Portuguese, is Brazilian. But
Okay.
overall, I do tend to like their poetry and what they can do a bit more. It's a bit weirder than what I think you can do with something that's, directly descended from Latin in some
Yeah.
way, or indirectly in this case of
Indirectly. Yeah, I was
romance.
gonna say it's
Uh,
actually
I was
indirect.
gonna say directly because I was considering like romance the son of Latin. I was like, oh, well, I guess it's the grandpa in
Romance
this
is
case.
like the weird illegitimate child of Latin.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
and
bastardized Latin.
yeah, it's a
Bastard.
bastardized form. No,
Yeah,
but yeah, it
Latin's
actually is.
bastard.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, Latin's
yeah,
bastard child.
yeah.
Okay. And
So the word
mhm.
curse comes from Latin cursus. Cursus, cursus, cursus. So it's a
Isn't a
good
plot a course?
it's course. It's related. So in English we get this word as course. Now the English word course is from French. So when you think of course in English, and I'm certain there's a Portuguese word that almost
Curso,
sounds like
yeah. Curso.
was it? Yeah,
Curso in cursar, yeah.
yeah.
That's the verb.
So course I'm the gonna the path, the way,
Yeah.
the way or the path, a course. We're gonna plot a course to I don't know, to the Delta Quadrant or something, Star Trek.
Yeah.
We're
We
gonna
use it for
Yeah,
classes too. Or you can
of course,
course the
yeah.
seas. Ele cursou os mares. You can course the seas. You can. So, for example, if I'm in university, I would say, and I do say, eu estou cursando essa matéria. I am coursing this subject in
Oh,
my
interesting.
university.
It's a
That's
verb. Yeah,
how you would say it. Yeah.
it's not a verb. Well, I guess coursing,
I didn't think they would be
it's
related
not
in any
really a
way to
verb.
curse.
Maybe coursing. I'm coursing. Maybe coursing is a verb in
He
English.
coursed the seas,
It
I
is, but
guess.
it's older and it's nautical, and you couldn't course material in a class. That would be weird. You could take a course.
Yeah,
Um,
you could take a course.
yeah. So it comes from cursus in Latin. So that's kind of strange until you think about, like again, you speak English amazingly well, so I can ask you these questions because you are effectively a native speaker, which is a total compliment, by the way. Um,
Thank you. Thank
when you think of a curse, what do you think of?
you.
Like somebody's cursed.
At the moment, actually, I think of both the bad word, or it's bad words have been spoken to someone, but in a magical way for the most part. But I also think, you know, curse, cussing, it
Yeah.
because I assume it comes from curse. I assume that's
Yeah,
an
cussing
Americanism.
is it just the R has dropped. It's just it's a
Yeah,
dialectical,
exactly.
it's a
That's what I
variant, it's
assume.
a dialect variant of pronunciation. It's the same word.
Or
Yeah.
yeah, I've seen English movies since I was a kid. It's like the mother says to the kid, "Don't curse" when
Yeah.
they're in polite company. Yeah, stuff like
Yeah.
that.
So
So that was what I associated
no,
with when I was little. Ever since
that's
I
good.
grew up and started seeing more scary movies or scary stories, I was like, oh, it can also be magical. You are
Yeah. Well,
cursed.
what's the
You are
first
under a
curse?
spell of doom.
What's the first curse? The original curse.
Uh, wait.
The original curse. So what happens in the story of
Yeah,
the
Cain and
original
Abel.
curse?
Is this
Garden
Cain and
Garden of
Abel?
Eden. So what happens? Like
Yeah.
the original
So
curse. Yeah.
Cain gets cursed, wander the earth. Wait. Oh
No,
my God, I
Adam and
didn't forget.
Eve.
Adam, oh yeah, thank you. I was thinking of Cain
The
and Abel for some
Protestant
reason.
always has to remind the Catholic of basic Bible stories. I find it
God damn it.
hilarious.
I was
Um,
thinking of
I'm giving
vampires
you
for
a
some
hard
reason.
time.
I
I'm
was
giving you.
thinking of
I'm
Cain.
just being mean. I'm just being mean. Like really?
I was like, well, I don't know, because in my
So
mind, I guess with the word curse,
well, but
I
right,
didn't
God. I
associate it
mean,
with Adam and Eve, but I
Adam and Eve
associated it with
are
the mark.
cursed. They are cursed.
Yeah, they are cursed.
They're literally expelled by force, right, out
Yeah,
of
bad
Garden of
words were
Eden. Yeah.
spoken to
And then
them
what does God
from
say?
God
And then what does
Himself.
God say? What are they going to have to do? Adam's going to have to till the ground, toil to he's going to well they're both going to die first off. So there's the first part of the curse is they're both going to die.
Yeah,
Um and they're no longer allowed back in Eden. That sucks big time. They now know the difference.
understatement.
They now know the difference between good and evil and are therefore recognizing that they are both evil and retarded, as the meme says.
Hmm.
And then Eve's gonna have issues bearing children. That's gonna be real painful and bad, and it's gonna be hard. And Adam's gonna have to like work really hard, backbreaking labor.
Hmm.
And then like the rest is human history from there. So that's like the first curse from a Christian
Which
perspective.
also ties into, if you look at the story itself, it will tie into when we examine the Latin benediction and
Yeah.
malediction, because God literally speaks it into
Well,
being.
that's interesting because the word for blessing, as you've said in Latin, is not drawn from cursus, but the word for cursing in English is drawn from a Latin word, which is interesting. But
That is weird
God has an intended
and
plan
cool.
for the world, and then due to the fall, what happens
It
to
goes awry.
humanity, we're knocked
Hmm.
off the path, off the course.
Yeah, the
We're knocked
chorus.
off the
Hmm.
course. So to curse, if you are cursed, or to curse is to knock someone or something off a path, off an intended path. And so that is one kind of a fascinating kind of linguistic metaphor for to be cursed is I've knocked off the
Hmm.
path. What I intend is not what's going to happen. And I mean, we all have plans. You can think of Heath Ledger. Me and Fred talked about that on our most recent episode. Heath Ledger is the Joker. Everyone's got a plan. Yeah, we have plans, but maybe those
Hmm.
plans are bad. So maybe if you're knocked off a bad plan, are you cursed? Maybe. Or maybe it's a secret hidden blessing, but maybe you have a good plan and you're knocked off that by some sort of unforeseen something or someone. Then you are also cursed. So yeah, cursing in this quite like maybe esoteric woo sense is something that God also does. I mean, God does curse things. Um,
Hmm.
Christ curses things, fig trees and things that don't
Yeah.
cooperate. Yeah. So it's not like, yeah. So cursing is a terrifying thing, and I would say it's terrifying because in a way, we all of us experience it every day. We have a plan. Rarely does a day go exactly to plan. Things come up and pop, and now maybe they don't knock you off the path, but maybe they do, right? Maybe you have a day where everything goes wrong. You end up
Hmm.
completely in a different place, or nothing works out right. That's technically all of those are technically curses. They're very, very tiny ones. But in the literal etymological sense of you're being buffeted off paths left and right. And I mean also if you think about like sort of the theological idea of Christ as the way, right,
Yes.
and then so the narrow way, and so to be knocked off the way is to be cursed,
Doomed
right?
in some
Yeah,
sense, yeah, to be
doomed,
cursed.
right, is to be cursed. So there's this path metaphor is very strong, I think. I when I first learned this, it blew me away. It was like that is so terrifyingly perfect metaphor for being cursed as you're knocked off paths. What's the we'll bring it to your we'll be intersectional. What's the I don't know Portuguese at all.
Yep.
So really I know some words. What is the Portuguese word for curse?
Okay, so for curse, we have one really. I've tried to think of another, but I couldn't. There are two for blessing,
Okay.
or blessed. For curse, it is amaldiçoar, is the verb. Maldição is the noun.
Okay.
Maldição is a curse. Amaldiçoar is to curse someone.
So that's
Amaldiçoado is someone who is cursed.
is that related then to maledicto?
Maledictio, yeah, it comes
Maledicto
from
in Latin. Yeah,
maledicto.
yeah, yeah.
Maldição, dizer. So dizer is to speak. he said this, ele disse
Right.
isso.
Yeah. Okay.
Mal is bad. So
Yeah.
maldição. Also we have dição. Ele teve uma didática. Oh my God, I completely screwed up the pronunciation of that, switching between Portuguese and English. But
Yeah. It
yeah,
happens.
but dição is like to speak or to learn of speaking. It's something to do with speaking.
Yeah.
Mal is bad. Speak bad of or speak bad into. Maybe it doesn't. It's not
Yeah.
really. It's vague with words like these, especially over time when we lose sight of where they came from. But
Well, yeah, but as we've
to
said,
speak
like,
bad
yeah, to
into
speak
being.
bad. And most Romance languages have some sort of cursing as bad speaking. That's sort of the metaphor, that's the linguistic metaphor that's run with pretty hard. It's most of them have something like this. This comes as not this you all Romance languages get this honestly from Proto-Romance, which is ultimately Vulgar Latin, and then if you look in Latin, maledicto,
Mhm.
so to or maledicere, or dicere if you're using Latin or church Latin pronunciation, which I don't really care. You probably have
The
opinions
better
about that.
Latin,
Yeah,
yeah.
whatever. The better Latin. I'm like,
My
what is
only
it?
opinion is it sounds cooler because obviously I grew up hearing it. So I'm like,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm biased. I think it's cooler.
yeah. To speak poorly or to speak ill of someone. So in that metaphor, we're talking about speech, which is very interesting. Um, the idea of cursing there is not so much to be knocked off a path, but is to speak or to be spoken ill of, something like that.
Mhm.
To have somebody speak bad words either at you or even about you. It doesn't have to be directly to you. Um, and this makes sense too. I mean, obviously, like if you're a fan of horror or folk tales around, like, speak bad words and then something bad happens elsewhere, right? Or I speak bad words directly to you, and now you are cursed, and you have to deal with the
Mhm.
curse for forever, however long, or maybe there's a task you have to do to overcome the curse. I mean, there's various different versions of how this is supposed to work. Um, I'll leave him unnamed, as an unnamed colleague of mine likes to say, objective spiritual reality aside, although I will say that, I mean, if you're anyone like me or Bulge, uh, I mean, words are inherently magical. So this is
Yeah.
you can actually curse someone, and you should not. Let's be perfectly honest, and you
I
should
mean,
not.
even in a completely real sense,
But that's
everyone
what I
has
was gonna say. Is
experienced
even
this.
if you're not talking about some
Someone,
sort of
have you never
magical
had like
resonance,
a day where someone just said something to you and that kind of made you sad?
yeah,
Or you said something to someone you could see they visibly like slumped down
yeah,
even a little. Like
yeah,
you can absolutely do that. You can speak badness into being.
yeah, and you can also
You
speak. You
should
can
be
also
very careful with what you say.
Well, you can also speak badness behind someone's back, and then everyone can
Yeah.
treat them differently now, and maybe completely undeservedly, oftentimes completely undeservedly. So, I mean, maledicere, or dicere in the church pronunciation, is also it also, I mean, it means to curse, to speak ill of, or also to slander. So it's connected to slandering someone.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
yeah, there's a word now. This doesn't exist. This word no longer exists. Was it in Old English or only Old Norse and Old Saxon? There's a word that's used in, let's say, I'll speak what I know. I'll speak what I'm certain of. In Old Norse, there's a word called nith, um, and nith is a noun, and it means it is a kind of curse. In like if you read any Icelandic sagas, you see this word used, and nith. It does the word doesn't exist in English, but the concept is something similar to maledicto, because it or
Mhm.
maledictio, because it's simultaneously slander and magic cast against someone, and it has to do with either spoken or written words. And so you could do this while speaking to someone, but you could also do it while, I think I talked about this on one of my recent appearances on Scarlet Thread Society as well. You could carve runes into wood or stone, and then rub your blood or animal blood in it to activate the spell. Um, and so need is a very like thing you shouldn't do. In lots of
I mean,
Icelandic,
malediction is a word in English too, so
yeah,
it's closer to
malediction is
that.
it's very it's not maybe in every cursing is a little bit feels more. I mean, they're both ultimately drawn from Latin, but curse has been in the English language for so long, it
Yes.
feels like more at home.
Hmm.
Whereas malediction,
Yeah,
yes,
no, it's more
feels
English.
very
Yeah,
kind of like
malediction. Yeah,
foreign. It
it's
feels
when you're
foreign.
trying to
Yeah,
invoke a very specific. If you're, writing a narrative, you would use malediction instead of curse in a very specific set of circumstances to have a very specific connotation
right.
instead of curse.
I guess my point is with Neve is that Neve in at least in like in Viking society, if somebody was Neving you, or doing the Neve against you, that could actually start like a feud, or even
Oh
like
yeah,
you could fight
I
over that because
believe that.
somebody's needing you. And so, yeah, I mean, like multiple cultures around the world, I would argue basically every culture around the world has this concept of slander, bad speech. Bad speech is harmful. Bad speech as, maybe just psychologically harmful, but also sociologically or culturally harmful. And then if you're anybody before maybe 200 years ago or even more recently, it was also connected to negative magical activity.
Hmm.
Right. Right. And again, even if you don't believe in that, which actually you probably should believe that that's at least theoretically possible. But let's say you take a completely materialist outlook. If somebody's hating you, saying bad things to you, you feel bad, or if they're particularly bad if they're spreading lies or slandering you behind your back, that can affect every aspect of your life. I mean, um, what is canceling or being canceled if not a kind of malediction, right?
Oh
It
yeah,
is a like literal curse in the most real material sense of what the maybe it's one of the in terms of modern culture, it's maybe one of the more material manifestations that we can think of
oh
cursing.
yeah.
To be
You can
canceled
definitely
is to
see it
effectively
have a
be cursed.
mimetic effect, almost like magic on the internet,
Well,
which we've talked about in
quite
in
literally
our
magic. It
yeah
is quite literally mad. Yes,
in
yeah,
our
it's
review of
quite.
the following. We talked a little about
Yeah, we
this. Yeah.
did. Yeah. So yeah, but it's interesting. So in English, we have this path metaphor. I think most, if not all, Romance languages, you have this ill-speaking slander metaphor, and they both kind of get to the heart of what cursing is. They both have different ways around it, kind of getting to the same more or less idea, but different metaphors. Um, if we can go maybe a little bit more positive, blessing
Hmm.
and blessing. Okay, so blessing is great. We'll start with now with the romance because because honestly, I think the English word is better for reasons, but I want to save it for the end. There's a reason why it's so awesome. I'm obviously biased. What's the word for blessing and
So
or to bless?
benção is basically benediction. It's
Yeah, benediction.
to
Yeah.
benção, abençoar is the act of doing it. Abençoado is someone who is blessed.
Okay.
Uh, we also have bem-aventurado, which is you will only really see this word when reading the Bible or having it read to you at Mass or when the priest is speaking. He'll use the word bem-aventurado. Bem-aventurado means literally good at well-ventured,
Well ventured.
well-adventured.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because bang, yeah, the
Bang
sapão.
as well.
So
Yeah.
bem-aventurado.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's well ventured, well adventured. It is what Christ says in the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are those who, and that whole repetition.
Yeah.
That word in Greek, makarioi, I'm not going to pronounce it correctly. It was
Yeah.
a translation of that concept into Portuguese, which is why it will appear in Portuguese Bibles. I am not enough of a Greek scholar, and honestly, trying to find etymologies in Portuguese on Google as compared to English is way harder because apparently we don't care. It's mostly a bunch of dictionary entries, and sometimes it'll have something useful. But yeah, so that's what I could find. So I couldn't really find the original meaning of Makarioi, except basically it means blessed. From my little quick Google search.
Makarios. Yeah, here I'm looking it up really here. Yeah. Oh, interesting. Apparently it means a happy, blessed, but also it has something to do with to be envied. A sense
Mm-hmm.
of positive envy, not negative envy, but positive envy. There are two different
Mm-hmm.
types of envy, I contend, although I don't know what the Thomists have to say about that. I don't know. You guys parse things differently. Um, but let's see else here. Makarios, or yeah, Makarios. I don't speak Greek. It's but mak, that prefix means to become long or large. So basically, it has to do maybe in French. Well, you could say largesse, like
Mm-hmm.
bounty,
Yeah, largesse, yeah.
like bounty, like a largeness of goodness,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. So when you are blessed in Greek, you are apparently assuming neither I nor Bulge are experts, so somebody correct us. But it seems to be like it has to do with like heaping goodness on you, something like that.
Yes,
Like lots of the
that
good.
makes
We're
sense.
like, yeah, double plus good, lots of good, yeah,
It's
on
all
you now.
looks good, yeah.
Double plus good. Um, Vidi well, Madrugs. Anyhow, I don't know. I'm just combining all dystopian conlangs in one there. Um,
Two
but
very different novels.
two very different novels. I actually think Clockwork Orange is the superior. But
I am a Orwell defender for artistic merit at the very least.
yeah,
I think
it's
Brave
it's
New World is a better predictive novel, but
yeah.
I think Orwell is actually really, really good artist. People underestimate, or people
Uh,
disagree about this a lot,
yeah.
but I am an Orwell defender for
Okay.
the most part.
As I claim as I'll
There's
say it
one
again
part
because
that's really boring in that
I
book.
came out I came out last episode and said, I actually haven't really read 84. I've only read about it. I'm one of those people. As I'm just like, whatever, yeah,
It's a good
it's
book.
like, yeah,
It's
gosh,
worth
I don't
reading.
know. Burgess's Clockwork Orange, I think, was just so much more compelling and more accurate to how what societal degeneration looks like, but that's just me. Topic for
Uh-huh.
another day. Yeah. Um, I was so taken by that one. I'm like, I don't know if I need to read more of these dystopian novels. This one kind of did it for me in the best of ways, but whatever. Yeah, but so like
Hmm.
to be blessed in Greek seems to have something to do with lots of goodness heaped on you.
Hmm.
Which makes sense. That's a great metaphor for getting to what being blessed means. Again,
Hmm.
I have a great love for my language, but I'm not every language around the world has a concept for being blessed, and they usually involve different metaphors, and they usually arrive more or less at the same concept, maybe by different paths, metaphorical paths, right?
Hmm.
Speaking of paths, assuming they are not
Yes.
cursed and knocked off
Different
the path.
courses.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the courses will take you, yeah,
Hmm.
appropriately. So yeah, to in Latin and then also in Romance. So Latin and all then Romance languages. This I want to say all, but I know Romanian does weird things. So don't quote me. I'm not a Romanian expert. Romanian is notable for being strange because it was invaded so many times and it was out there in the East. But like benediction, right? So is the English loan from directly from Latin, and so to speak the well speaking, the good speaking, something like that. The speak so in Latin and Romance by extension, the blessing and cursing has to do with speaking. So speaking is impl is well, it's not even implied; it's literally stated in both of those um, words, malediction benediction. So speaking well, speaking poorly. So while you can speak poorly or ill of someone, and that will actually cause them actual problems in their life. You can also speak well of someone, and to speak well of someone, particularly when it's deserved, is actually helps people because this is there's the metaphor. It's a very American sort of Twitter deal, but the whole like when the black lady at the supermarket says, "Oh, honey," it's like really, yeah, I love the way you look today, honey, or something like that. You're like, "Oh, I just feel better about myself. I don't know why." And it's like, did anything objectively change in your day? Not really, but subjectively, that word or those words of blessing made all the difference. Right, made all the difference. And this is anyone who's genuinely kind and nice to someone,
Hmm.
hopefully this effect is what will happen. It is notable. I obviously am very white, but it is interesting.
Hmm.
I do actually like that in Black English in America, people use the word bless way more actively than we do as
Bless is a great word.
as weird like de-churched whiteys.
Hmm.
And bless you with I actually like that. I think that's good. Sometimes I've heard some people say it cheapens it. I'm like, no, they're actually using the word. White Americans don't use this word too much anymore. So it's
Hmm.
interesting. Like you like why are you come on? Like do you
It's
want
also benediction. To say
yeah,
well of someone is also a
just say
very good
well of
description
someone.
of
Yeah.
prayer when you
Yeah.
pray for someone.
Yeah.
Uh, or when a priest, or when you ask a priest to bless, like, this cross, or can you
Mm-hmm.
offer me a quick blessing? I'm going for a surgery tomorrow.
Right.
He usually either say a prayer over you, do the sign of a cross, but there
Right.
are words involved.
Words
There
involved.
is a
Yeah,
good
words.
speaking of
Good
to
speaking.
God for
Right.
you.
Who is I think well, I don't think there's a confessional disagreement on this. Although
I
I've
don't
been
think
told by
so
you that I
either.
am quote or maybe even too poetic in my theological understanding. I'm like, oh, okay, my brother in Christ. Okay, I converted mostly by reading C.S. Lewis, so like of course there's poetry involved in my understanding. It's all mytho-poetic in the end,
Yeah,
but
Lewis got it from probably goddamn Chesterton.
yeah,
It's just this
I'm like
ring of
I can vibe with
Anglo-Catholics
the poetry,
being
man. I'm okay with it. Yeah,
poets.
yeah.
It
I'm
is
not
a
the
very
Thomist
poetic
trying to
language.
split
There's a reason
theological
I like
atoms.
there's a reason I like most of the English poets over most of the Portuguese poets. It's a very poetic language, I find.
It's
Very
yes,
poetic peoples.
poetic people for sure. I like yeah, I mean, I think of like Milton. Like Milton was a like Paradise Lost is just I feel like that lives rent free in my brain, but in the worst or not in the worst, the best rather, the best
Mhm.
possible way. Like I love that. Like I'll just like sometimes I'll just find myself thinking or saying things that sound sort of, I mean, nowhere near as good as Milton, but sort of Miltonian in their cadence. And I'm like, this is something. And I realized like 2 hours later, oh yeah, you were like for some reason your brain was accessing parts of Paradise Lost
Good
just in
poetry will
terms of
do
the way
that,
you're
man.
talking, like because it feels so like normal, because it's such a great poem. Anyhow, that's me. Um, but yeah, so
Good
like
poets will do that.
yeah. I mean, the good ones stick in your brain. Um, so blessing,
Hmm.
in sort of Romance and Latin has to do with good speaking, which I think is great. I like that. Speaking is a very magical act, and so you want to do it well, aka bene or bem, or however it turns out in the Portuguese. Bem,
Bang, yeah.
bem,
B-E-M.
bem.
We have bam, bone.
Yeah,
Bone,
bone,
it's two
bang. I
different
don't know it.
words.
Yeah, everything is a nasal vowel in Portuguese, and it's great, but I cannot get nasalized. I have a
No,
hard enough
bone, stone.
bow, stone, bow. I have a hard enough time doing nasal vowels in French, and then I can't even try to do them in Portuguese. I'm like, I can't get the French ones. I'm not going to get the Portuguese ones at all. They're not going to be right, and I'm going to end up saying something I didn't mean to. Um, so speaking well in English, we have this word, the verb to bless, and we have the noun blessing. Bulge, this is not a required knowledge. I'm just testing the waters. Do you know the etymology of to bless?
I do not. I specifically didn't research it for this because I assumed you'd have
Good.
that handle. But
Yes,
I'm
thank you for
very
doing that.
curious.
Yeah, it's actually this is one of my I am somebody who is so ridiculous and nerdy. I have my favorite etymologies, not just in English, but in other languages too. Like I have my ones that I sometimes I think about them and it makes my day feel better. I'm a
Mhm.
weird person. Bless is one of these in English. I love this word so much, and not just because we should be blessing and not cursing, but because like the history of the word bless. So bless in modern English comes from um, blessen in old Middle English, and it comes from bletzian in Old English. Bletzian. So in Old English, there was a T in there. The T is dropped away, the vowel has changed, a lot of other things has changed, but the fact that there's a T there is notable. Blet. So obviously that's not modern English. But does blet remind you of another word in English?
Uh, let.
We have it we have it's
It
connected
sounds
to
kind
a
of like the
word.
other
It's connected
BPO
to a
word.
word in another old English word. Blood.
Yeah, I was gonna say blood.
Blood. Blood.
I wasn't sure, but I was
So
suspecting. It's like that can't be right, can it?
so this is how much English has changed over time. You look at the word bless and you're like, what's bless? Like, I don't know what a is it to be less? No, it is not to be less. I heard somebody say that, and recently I almost threw something against the wall. A, because it's bad historical linguistics, and B, because this is one of my favorite words in the English language. I'm like,
Uh-huh.
shut up. That's wrong. And they were serious too. I'm like, no, you're leading people astray. You're literally cursing them. Stop cursing them off the path of right knowledge. So blood. So what is okay? So think about this. You have to get this is going to get weird quickly.
Okay,
What might
I'm
blood
up
have
for
to
it.
do with blessing?
I mean, you have a Catholic guess. I'm pretty sure you know what
Yes,
my
I,
answer is
I
gonna
know.
be.
Yeah.
Well,
So
uh,
this is a metaphor of blood and blessing that is also clearly heavily Christian, but it is also
mhm,
pre-Christian.
I was gonna actually ask
Very,
this
very,
as well. Is
yeah.
it a pre-Christian or
It's a
post-Christian
pre-Christian metaphor that's
metaphor?
taken up very quickly once Anglo-Saxons convert to Christianity and is then being used to talk about Christian blessing. And you could and people might go, oh, happened all the time. It's called enculturation. The Catholics write
Yeah.
a lot about this. Yeah. And so the way that Anglo-Saxon uh like churchmen were translating uh benedicere or benedicere was bletzion. So which literally means to blood or
Ooh.
to smear something with blood. So remember what I said about how you could use
You
for
have a curse.
the
Uh-huh.
curse, you can also use it to bless. So this using of for the Germanic peoples, so the Norse, Anglo-Saxons, the Saxons that stayed on the continent, the Germans. Blood was super, super magical, which, by the way, has anyone read the Old Testament? Blood is also super, super
Yep.
magical, quote unquote, meaning supernatural. Blood sacrifices.
Just
Uh,
think of the covenant between Abraham and God. It started
yeah,
with the sacrifice of animals, and there's the spilling
yeah,
of their entrails and their blood.
blood. Yeah, so blood, as Renfield from Dracula would say, the blood is the life. And even though he's viewing that in a bad way, there's something
Mhm.
true about that, right? Like blood as life force, blood as the thing that allows you to stay alive, red as a sign, simultaneously as a symbol for danger, because if you see a lot of red, you might be bleeding out.
Mhm.
But also as a sign of life and vitality, that there it's weirdly both wrapped up in there, right?
Mhm. Yep.
And so blood as means of cursing or blessing. So when you were if you were so again, it's really difficult for pointy-headed people such as I to and people far more knowledgeable than I am to really know exactly what pre-Christian Germanic religions looked like. It's very difficult because everyone who was writing it down was Christian,
Yep.
at least for
Mhm.
100 or 200 years at that point. So it's difficult to kind of figure it out. But it's pretty clear here. Baked into the word bless is the word for blood. Bletzion in its oldest attested form, Bletzion. Okay, that probably has to. I mean, I'm going to say that clearly has something to do with animal sacrifice in order to activate, quote unquote, an effect, aka
Mhm.
magic. Um, so there's the Ruthel cross. I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of the Ruthel cross. This is going to be audio only, so people can just bring it up if you're interested. The
Like
Ruthel
that.
cross, it's spelled like Ruthwell, but it's pronounced Ruthel.
Ruthful.
Yeah, but it's
Okay.
it's England, so
Ruthful.
Ruthwell, but
Yep.
Ruthel. Yeah, the Ruthel cross is really cool. I have not seen it in person. I'd like to. It's a bucket list item for me. A very, very beautiful Anglo-Saxon cross. Clearly Christian, but also clearly Germanic. It
Yeah, I'm
has
looking at it right now.
it has
Yeah.
runes on it, talking about Christ and his sacrifice, and it would have been originally painted red.
Mhm.
And so Christ is being sacrificed on the cross. On the side, there are runes talking of Christ's sacrifice, and they would have been painted red. This would have been very clearly connected in the minds of the Anglo-Saxons to
Uh-huh.
a blood sacrifice. The blood is flowing into the runes, thereby activating them, aka activating salvation in this way that is simultaneously very Christian, but also uses all sorts of pagan metaphors
Mhm.
for like what is involved in activating magic. It was
Mhm.
never it was clearly to have strong magic in the pre-Christian Germanic mind was to have blood. Like you don't get anything for free. Like nothing is for
Yeah.
free. Right? Like you need to take something to get something. There has to be a transference of energy. And that's usual across most magical systems worldwide, whether that's sort of
I mean,
quote
yeah.
unquote real world, or even if you think about fantasy novels. I know you and I talk
Yeah.
about
Mhm.
fantasy novels. Like there's usually a magic system, right? And we all complain when the fantasy novels magic system doesn't make any sense. We're like, this doesn't make any sense. And you're like, I still to this day go on rants about my wife, like J.K. Rowling. I'm like, what the hell is this magic system? Nothing makes sense. It's words, but then sometimes it's not words. Do they have to have the wand in their hand? Do they not have to have the wand in my hand? And my wife is like, just shut up and enjoy the books because I'm trying to finally read through them. I'm like, this is driving me crazy because it's not making any sense. Um, not that magic needs to make sense, but yeah, like for the pre-Christian Germanic speaking peoples such as Anglo-Saxons, it wasn't free. You didn't just get power for free. I have to give up something, sacrifice, give something up, and then hopefully receive something back. So this is very Girardian. You've already
Yeah, probably universal,
you're
in fact.
giving up. It's pretty universal, giving up and receiving back. Um, and again, it's not like the Romans weren't doing animal sacrifice; they did a tons of it. But it's just interesting that in the word that survives for blessing and cursing, it has to do with speaking. In the word for at least blessing, the actual word to bless in English, it has to do with this blood, this spilling of blood in order to get something back. Which is all totally metal, very Viking metal, and very
Mhm.
pre-Christian again. But it is also really quickly taken up by Christians because
Yeah.
it works so well.
Yeah,
Atonement, right?
obviously.
It works very well when you're talking about Christianity to people who are maybe recently Christianized and don't totally get it. They've been baptized, but what does that mean? Somebody put water on me and said something in Latin. I don't know what that means. They gave me a benediction, but I'm a newly
I mean,
converted
yeah,
Germanic speaking
Christ
person. I don't know
is
what is
literally
that?
called the
Yeah.
Lamb of God. What what did Abraham do with the lamp again in the beginning of his story? You know,
Yep.
it's
Yep.
the impulse to sacrifice animals
Yep.
is actually not wrong, like at all. It's the weird part of evangelizing Christianity, saying you don't have to do that anymore.
Right.
It's there's been a final sacrifice. That's when you say, "Oh, this guy did a sacrifice," which is like really important. They probably got it. They maybe they didn't accept it because it wasn't part of their religion, but they
Yeah.
understood the concept. It's really
Yeah.
the now you don't need to do it anymore. That's probably the big
Right.
stumbling block a
Or
lot of the
maybe that
time.
like what you were doing was like not was only was never really going to work. Your impulse
Yeah,
was maybe not bad, but it was never really going to work, right? It was
yeah.
never going to work. Yeah, the way you were doing it was never going to work.
You realize sacrifice is necessary, but you didn't have the right sacrifice,
Right. It's all about the correct sacrifice, the
or
correct
at least the right
sacrifice.
person to sacrifice to. Maybe
Right.
that was also the
Exactly.
problem.
Yeah. Yeah. It has to do with sort of the ritual purity wasn't right. It wasn't correct
Mhm.
the way it was being done. But the impulse of giving up to receive back is not necessarily a bad thing, right? That's actually, I would
We
argue,
also call it the sacrifice of the mass,
right.
for a
Well,
reason.
you do.
I do.
You do.
The royal
But
we, me and the
but
other guys behind
but
me, the
but
Catholics.
in an attempt to find some middle ground, because this is what Anglicans do with the Via Media. So to find some middle ground, the
I
literal
think we
middle
can. It
path.
shouldn't be hard.
By the way, the Via Media is the middle path.
Yeah.
So I'm
Via
not.
Média. You have
Yeah,
that
yeah,
expression as
yeah.
well in Portuguese.
So the middle path, I would say, you guys focus on the sacrifice, which I don't necessarily think is wrong. I think it comes across as weird, but weird not need not be bad. I think it's just kind of like,
Difference
okay,
of emphasis more than
difference of
anything, then.
emphasis. For us, it's I think I mean I don't want to this is just my impression. I could totally be wrong. For
Hmm.
you guys, when I've been to Catholic Mass, it seems like yeah, there's obviously a huge focus on the sacrifice, and then you receive. And for us, it's like you're receiving Christ. Also, there was a sacrifice. There's sort of it's like two sides of the same coin, I think. But maybe that's me overly simplifying
There
things.
might just be also a difference of emphasis between what's the name? Different churches in different countries as well.
It's
There is
cultural
a
too, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a very
yeah,
cultural thing as well,
yeah.
I
I
think.
mean, yeah. I mean, Anglicanism is not just Anglo. It's obviously a world tradition. It's all most Anglicans are African.
Hmm.
So which and African Anglicanism is really cool and very different also from
Hmm.
Anglo-American slash
I've met
Anglo-British.
one African Zimbabwean Anglican,
Yeah,
which was a
it's
pastor
I
at
mean,
the one Anglican. Well, I don't know which Anglican denomination it was, but it was an Anglican denomination, which the only one that spoke English at least in
yeah,
my city of Rio. Was a very nice and very smart guy.
yeah. No, again, but yeah, most Anglicans are African now, which is cool. I think it's good because they're busy coming back over to America and re and re
Yeah, a
and
lot of the
re.
people at the parish were African too. It
Well,
was
like
old English expats and
yeah,
Africans.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Well, and like the only reason we have the main reason why we have the ACNA in North America, Anglican Church in North America, which is the sort of the anti-Canterbury folks, is because of Rwandans. So,
Mhm. Makes sense.
who yeah, and the Church of Rwanda has done some great things, particularly in the context of the horrific genocide that happened.
Yeah,
Their
post
role in
colonial
healing
stuff.
the country of the process, it's ongoing, but the ongoing
Yeah.
process of healing that country from what happened there, their church actually played a big role in that. And so again, theological differences aside, I think we can all look at that and say that's a good thing, right? Like this is a
Yeah.
good thing, and having American Anglicans actually believe in like the creeds is a good
Hmm.
thing, and like
Yeah.
actually follow what we've always said and so obviously I'm coming in later into Anglicanism. Part of it, I was always drawn to Anglicanism, but part of the reason why I didn't is because it was so incredibly ridiculous in Prague. Because I didn't realize because it was just the Episcopalians and they were ridiculous. God bless
Have you
them.
seen the Episcopalians meme
Yeah,
where
it's
it's
like
I
I
think it's a
can't.
woman pastor? Yeah, you
Yeah,
don't believe in God. Don't worry, we don't believe that shit
yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So it's been great to just for me to discover ACNA and be like, oh, people actually believe here and actually like really
Yeah.
take stuff
Whoa.
seriously. Yeah, whoa. That's the what a concept. So
What a great
what a
bar to
concept.
be.
Yeah, I have not seen that meme, but I can totally imagine it in my head. Yes, because it's
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
it's what it is. It's so sad. Yeah. In any case, so blessing has to do with blood. That's really cool. Super metal. I dig it.
It's real. It's that I actually really like that word more.
Oh, it's
Uh,
so cool.
'Cause that's such a good idea too. Like I really admire the ingenuity of, I don't know if it would be monks, priests, or well, I guess monks. Some monks are priests too.
Missionary monks. Yeah,
Missionary
yeah,
monks
yeah,
would to translate that's like, oh no, I got it. Yeah, that's the word we need to use. Like when they're
yeah.
trying to learn what language would it be? Old English?
Old English. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, when they're learning Old English and they hear that word, they ask what it means. They're like, "Yep, got it. Yep, no, I know how to translate benediction. Yep,
yeah,
got it."
yeah. I mean,
That's really
it's
cool.
may you be smeared with blood. I mean, is it,
Hmm.
may God bless you and keep you, and may you be smeared in blood. Which again, I love that because I love metal actually. So I'm like, this is super metal. This is in the best of ways, right? Like this is may you be covered in Christ's blood. Like that is
Hmm.
as the older English hymn says, nothing but the blood of Jesus. Right, like
Hmm.
that's what can wash away my sin. Like it's this very it just it gets to the core of I think what the crucifixion is about. And
Hmm.
the idea that blessing, whether people, so most people don't know that, right? That blessing is connected to the word for blood. But dear listeners, now you know that. I do have a PhD in this stuff. This is real. That's a correct etymology. Go spread it to your friends because it's awesome. But when you're saying, to bless someone, what you're really saying in a Christian sense is, may you be covered with Christ's blood, which is to say, may you be saved, which is to say, the
Hmm.
best thing you can say about someone, which is the best
Hmm.
benediction you can say to someone, right? Like, so,
Luther also, the little I've read of him, he also has a emphasis on the washing of the dirty sinner. With I don't not necessarily he probably uses the words Christ's blood several times, but I don't
yes,
remember.
a
But
lot.
he does have. I remember he has a snow metaphor, like something covering you up,
Yep.
uh, to be white because I think because he used certain vulgar language, I think he said you're smeared in shit or something like that
Oh
as a
yeah,
symbol.
pretty much. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Effectively. It's
Christ is like
effectively,
snow
yeah, yeah.
covering you up
Poop is a
and
big deal for
washing away.
Luther. Poop is a big deal
Yeah.
for Luther. Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, so for
yeah.
Thomas More, I think one of his insults for exchanging basically pamphlets for having a pamphlet war, and Thomas More prefaces it with an apology to the reader for like rough language, but this guy deserves it. It says, "Your mouth is the river of shit from which all shit flows," which is
Well,
such an insane thing
well, and
for a saint in my denomination
it's
to say.
actually not though. Well, here it is insane from a modern perspective,
Yeah, it is. Of
but
course,
from
I expect that happen a
anything
lot.
early modern and earlier, poop is connected to demons.
Hmm.
And so
I
if
mean,
you're
yeah,
making a
St.
claim that
Francis
what's
also had an emphasis on this as well.
if you're
If you
making a
don't
claim,
know,
yeah,
yeah, if you do, I remember in one of it because St. Francis didn't write. I don't even think he knew how to write. But maybe he did because he was the son of a
yeah,
fairly rich tradesman, merchant.
forget the
That's the
yeah,
word.
merchant family, yeah,
But
yeah.
one of his followers asked him, like, I'm having these dreams, and there's this figure that's talking to me. I don't know if it's Christ or the devil, but it's saying it's Christ. And St. Francis was offered to shit in its mouth. If it laughs, it's God. If it's disgusted and repulsed, it's the devil. Do that. And then if it's the devil, it'll go away. If it's Christ, he'll laugh at you and maybe scold you. And that was all he said on that, which is such a funny thing to
Yeah.
say. Offered the shit in its mouth.
Yeah, it is very yeah. The Middle Ages is a crazy time. Poop is everywhere.
Crazy,
Yeah.
crazy time.
But yeah, poop's connected to, as you know, poop's connected to demons, particularly for Luther, but also for
Hmm.
anybody of that time period, really. Like, poop is bad.
Yeah, I
Poop
suspect
spreads
he didn't just
illness.
invent that idea. That was probably
No,
something
no,
the
no. He's
cultural
vibey.
milieu.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
many people tend to. I was actually reading a book the other day, part of a book the other day, and I just had to scoff because it was making these claims of Luther claimed this and Luther claimed that, and he invented this and he invented that. I'm like, Luther was just he was doing he was doing a remix of the song, but the song was already being sung. This stuff is
Mhm.
already predating him. I'm like, what are you talking? It was one of, and I quickly laughed and just put the book down because it was like,
Yeah, he's
these people don't
sampling lots of
understand.
tracks.
Yeah, you can disagree with Luther. That's fine, but at
Yeah,
least
because we can disagree with cultural milieus, but you
at
need to
least
trace where he's getting
understand.
it from.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, where he's
understand.
coming from.
Yeah, that's like when people are like, "Oh, Luther was uniquely anti-Semitic." I'm like, "No, he was not.
No, he was not.
No, he
Absolutely.
was not."
That is
Yeah,
crazy. No, he
yeah,
was just very eloquent in his
yeah. I mean, he
anti-Semitism,
wrote a lot
maybe.
about
He's
it.
a great writer.
Yeah,
But no, he was
no,
not
it's not.
unique at
Yeah,
all.
people. and this is again, it's fine. This is an episode of Tangents. We're just chatting
Mhm.
mostly. This probably would have properly been going out as a live stream, but it's probably good because where it's not because you're upside down right now.
Yep.
So, but yeah, I mean, like people just don't this happens on all sides, right? Like somebody's remembered for doing something, and then people will go, "Wow, they invented this," and you're like, maybe they did, but oftentimes it's that they remixed it in a slightly different way and they got popular, but there was people behind them who were already kind of doing the thing a few
Mhm.
centuries before. Like usually that's the case for most historical figures. It's like they're remembered because of something that the conditions came together in a certain way, right? And so we lift them up as rightly or wrongly as sort of the progenitors of something, right? I mean, you'll hear Germans spout some shit. I love Germans, but mein Gott, yeah, spit doch. Y'all are crazy because you'll hear Germans say Martin Luther created the modern German language, and I want to throw a book against a wall. I'm like, that's clearly false. They're like, but the Luther translation of the Bible. I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about. It was yeah, was that part of it? Of course. But it was like 12 other things that were happening simultaneously,
Mhm.
right? Or like why is Luther seen as like the first Protestant? He's not the first Protestant. He's the first one who like was successful and wasn't killed. So then there could be a Protestant, you know what I mean? Like, and he got
Mhm.
the backing of the princes in Germany. Like
Yeah.
that's why I'm not saying wrongly. I'm just saying like that's why. It's not of course he's unique as we all are unique special snowflakes, right? But I mean like come on, this is just I know I'm speaking to the
Like I get, like, yeah, just from a brief historical things, like, well, the Cathars and Albigensians are pretty weird. If you really want to, like, say, like, a revolt against the Catholic Church counts as being
well,
Protestant, they
yeah.
count.
Well, I mean
Like,
also I'm
they're
thinking of
weird.
people
I wouldn't
Jan
lump them in
Hus.
with you guys because I
Jan
like you
Hus.
guys and the
No, no,
Albig.
no.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Jan
Jan
Hus is
Hus.
cooler. Yeah.
Hus, right? Hus is a great example of somebody who's burnt to a
Hmm.
crisp. But had you who's not been burnt to a crisp, Luther might. Who knows what would have happened? I mean, that's a counterfactual history, but who knows? I mean, like maybe the seat of modern modernity would have been Czech
Hmm.
like the Czech area, Czech speaking areas, and not German speaking areas because it just
Yeah,
has to
the
do.
Hus. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
There's
Hus
actually
like
a kind of a game that deals with this recent game, Czech game, Felvidek. Basically a JRPG in style uses RPG Maker, but it's about the conflict between the Hussites and the Catholics, basically. And there's demons
although
and other weird stuff
although
going on.
although
It's
the Hussites were basically Catholics. That's the confusing
yeah,
thing about it is they were basically Catholics. It's like
that's also part of the joke. There's
yeah,
lots of jokes and lots of Czech language jokes. It's in English, but a lot of the
yeah,
expressions are literally translated from Czech so that it becomes a joke.
yeah.
It's a great little like 5 hour game. It's
I'll have to check
worth
it
your
out.
time. It's
Yeah,
just so weird and silly, but
yeah.
it's a lot
Well,
of fun.
and even like Luther himself was aware that he was standing on Hus's shoulders in many respects, because that was like maybe a little less than 100 years before. Like that was that people knew of that, and yeah. So, but anyhow, yeah. Okay, so we've gone on multiple tangents. That's fine. But yeah,
Mhm.
blessing, cursing, different languages. I was just looking up. So I was, I have a few other languages at my
Yeah, I was
fingertips.
curious about German and
So
Norwegian.
German, yeah.
So
So German. So the word for to curse someone or to curse something is fluchen, and then the word for curse itself is fluch, which is of course drawn from the verb. You don't need to know German to go. Fluchen is the verb, fluch is the noun. They must be related.
yeah,
You can get
uh-huh.
that just from the similarity in sound. Um, it comes from an earlier Proto-Germanic term flockern. So flockern becomes fluchen in German. And I'm looking at the Köbler-Gerhard Deutsches Etymologisches Wörterbuch right now, the German etymological
Book of
dictionary.
etymologies.
Yeah, etymological dictionary, and it says it's related to Indo-European, the Indo-European prefix plak or plag, which is connected uh to hitting or striking, and is
Huh.
also connected to other Indo-European words related to being flat.
A very literal people, the
So
Germans.
to
Just hit.
be, it's
It's
like
just a
to
curse.
hit, to flatten. And I mean, so to
To
curse
bash with
someone or
a
to be
club.
cursed is to be flattened by a force, right? Yeah, you're
Hmm.
like if you've been cursed, I've been flattened. Like it's like look,
Uh-huh.
I cannot even stand up, right?
Yeah,
I'm like
gravity
prone.
is heavier now.
Yeah, woof, yeah.
That's
Which
actually
is
also
pretty
there's a
great.
lot of archetypal stories about this, at least the way Jung talks about this in German, about the little man on your back in dreams. That happens a lot to his German patients. I remember him telling, they're like, whenever there's something holding you back, their dreams, at least in the German culture, are about something on their back being heavy. About specifically a little man, which was interesting to me. That sometimes
Well,
hits you. That was
you
a
can also think,
weird
yeah,
thing.
yeah, and you're the Jung expert. I need to read more Jung.
Which I am the slightly more
Yeah,
advanced
well,
Jung.
relatively speaking, relatively speaking. Yeah. Well, you know what Jung would say about the archetypes and the way that, anyhow, will resist the temptation to have a Canadian accent for the rest of the episode. Speaking of which, I tried to watch his conversation with Dawkins, and I got
I
like two
didn't even
minutes
try.
in, and it was so painful. I'm like, I can't. I said aloud to myself in the car, I can't handle this, and turned it off. I was like, I can't
Oof.
handle this right now. It's just like Dawkins not understanding what a myth is, and then
Oh, that was I saw
oh
that clip and I'm like, this is so obvious what he's trying to say. He's not expressing himself that well, but it's so obvious
oh
what he's
obvious.
trying to say.
I
And
did watch.
Dawkins is like,
So
oh,
I
no.
watched the clip where I actually liked the clip, and I was like, you know what? I enjoyed that clip. I'm not going to ruin the whole thing with the whole episode. The clip
Hmm.
where Peterson is talking about a dragon as like the ultimate predator and all of the dangerous
Yes.
things. I was
Uh-huh.
like, I was like, yeah, roll me a fatty one of those and light it up. That's great. I'm loving this.
Yeah, no, we've talked about monster. I think you even
Yeah,
talked
we've
about there's an
talked about this.
academic
Yeah,
subdiscipline of studying monsters in
yeah,
folklore.
yeah. I mean, I
And
am
I
kind of a
thought of
monster
you when
guy,
I
so
saw that. I was like, oh, that's a nice tip. And the comments were dragging Peterson, and I was like,
I
it's
was
a
like, no, no,
fairly
no,
obvious
that's,
point.
I mean, there are things to drag Peterson for, but not that. I was like, that's
Yeah.
well said. That's succinctly well said. I mean, I was like, this is a
Mhm.
really good description of what a dragon, but like you said, you could easily substitute it with monster in general, right? Like
Mhm.
dragon as an archetype within the larger archetype
Yes.
of monster, right? Like it's
Dragon is like a European instantiation of
yeah,
this larger thing.
everything that's dangerous and bad and scary, right? In one. But yeah, the fact that Dawkins, we've shat on Dawkins, not with you, but now welcome to the club of shitting on Dawkins. The poop
Oh, I
is
love
coming
to.
out of his mouth continually, like Thomas More was
Yes.
like, it's just poop. But yeah, like that was just I was like Dawkins, I cannot, he's known to pwn himself. He's not to be taken seriously. Yeah. But so flattening. Sorry, back to the etymology. Flattening,
Hmm.
flattened fluch. And I mean, it's actually just striking me now is that there's a word in German that has to do with flat, which is flach. Flach. And that I think would be, I will double check that. I do believe that's probably, if not
From the same
directly, it's
IE,
coming from the same
root in
Indo-European, the
European.
same
Yep.
Indo-European sort of, yeah.
It sounds
Fluch.
even closer to the pla than
Yeah,
the
it's
flip.
bleh. Well, P's became F's in German, and so that's
Yeah, I
so P's
gathered
to F.
from that word
Yeah,
because I
yeah,
was
yeah,
weirded out when you said the plot. I was like, well,
yeah.
okay, I guess they
Yeah.
changed that one to an
That's
F.
the erste Lautverschiebung. Yeah, that's the Grimm's law. That's the first sound change. Sorry. Uh this means nothing to non people
German
who don't do
nerdy
German
things
stuff.
there.
Yeah, this is something it means something for us. Yeah. So yeah, being flattened. So what's the German verb or German word for blessing? Be Segnung related to
White.
Segen, the verb Segen. So Segen is actually interesting. So Segen has lived inside German for so long that it doesn't really look like what it once was, which is normal, just like curse, the word curse has in English. But Segen comes from Latin signum, which is where we get the word sign from in
Mm.
English, as in Ace of Base, I saw the sign and opened up my eyes. Life is
Yes,
demanding.
signal is also
Yeah,
a word in Portuguese.
yeah, signum. Yeah. So a sign. Um, and so sign is an that's I mean that's it. So it's interesting here because in German, Segen is actually a verb, but it's drawn from a Latin noun. But that's fine. That tends to happen when words jump into new languages. You tend to get some sort of flexibility with parts of speech and stuff like that. Um, signum in Latin is sort of like a mark, a signal,
Hmm.
a seal, an emblem. And that can be kind of maybe for a modern sort of strange until you think about like, well, what is maybe blessing is being sealed, right? By God,
Hmm.
by Christ being sealed, right? I mean, if you think of like well, I'm assuming I'll have a more poetic way of talking about this than you, but I'm assuming our theologies will be roughly equivalent. Baptism as a
Yes, I assume
sign, as a
so.
sealing. baptism as a sign, not in the way that Calvinists mean it, but like as in a literal like sealing, like
Yeah, you are like stamped.
stamped. Sacrament. That's like when I
That is
love
one of the images that came into my head when I was reading the theology of baptism. It's just like God gets a little seal,
stamp.
puts it in ink, and then
Yeah,
stamps the baby on the
yeah.
forehead.
Yeah. I mean, I don't hate I like to hate on them, but I love Calvinists. They're Christians, but man, they're like, but these sacraments are just signs. I'm like, that's literally what a sacrament is, my brother in Christ. It's like you're not, they're just symbols. I'm like, you don't know what the word symbol means. Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
like, you don't understand what these things mean. You're actually agreeing with me, but you don't think you are. Yeah, it's just very strange. And you keep saying things and I go, yes, and they go, no, that's not what I mean. I'm like, I don't care what you mean. I know what you actually trying to mean. You're not getting to it. You're being cursed. I'm helping you push you back
Yeah.
onto the
I am
path of where
uncursing
I am
you, please.
uncursing you right now, trying to help you. And they get more and more frustrated. God bless them. I don't know. It's a, yeah. Of all Christians there, I think of all groups of Christians that I've met, the two most autistic groups are Calvinists and Thomists. And I don't know what
Yep.
that means, but it might be, I think that's true. It's just, they're
I
like,
do think, yeah, there's at least stylistically, I do sometimes see a similarity between Calvinist and Thomist, at least lay philosophers.
lay,
I haven't
elite,
read
yeah,
a
at the lay
Calvinist
level.
theologian, but
Yeah.
at the lay level, I do see sometimes a stylistic similarity, if not that much of a theological one, because I haven't read much into Calvinist theology.
Yeah. I mean, and that's fine. I mean, I'm autistic too in my own way, I guess. So it's fine, but but yeah, to be signed, to be sealed, delivered, as the song would say. Yeah. Signed, sealed, delivered. It's a great song.
Mhm.
Uh, that also is kind of a powerful image, I think, of being blessed. And again, it's not that, when English speakers hear the word to bless, we're not thinking of blood. And when Germans hear Segen, they're not thinking of signed, but
Mhm.
but that's the history of the word meanings. And I do think if as I've been saying on STS, Scarlet Thread Society, esoteric etymology is good, right? Like you peel back the layers of the word meanings over time, and it also kind of, it doesn't mean that that's necessarily how speakers today will view it, but it gives you as a speaker today insight into the metaphors and sort of linguistic paths that
There is a
that meaning
deepening of the
took.
understanding of what you're saying, and that matters in some way that's hard to articulate. Like what same in Portuguese for the I forget the word Ziegen and Vleugen in German.
Segenfluchen. Yeah, yeah,
Saying
yeah,
and Vleugen. Abençoado e amaldiçoar. We don't really think you're saying ill or you're speaking well of someone.
right.
We don't
Yeah,
think of that, at least not consciously.
not
Although in
consciously.
some
Yeah,
way it's so similar to how you would say bem dizer or mal dizer that it like at some level it might register if
yeah,
someone really thinks about it for a little bit, but we don't usually think it when we say
yeah,
it or when we hear it said. But it's to keep it in mind is in some way I can't quite articulate a greater appreciation of what those words do, and of maybe especially for the Portuguese cursing amaldiçoar, the speaking ill of
yeah.
and to curse as well, just knowing that you're throwing someone off course, man.
Throwing someone
Maybe
off course. Yeah,
they're not on a bad course, so maybe you don't want to do that right now.
right. Yeah,
It's important to keep in mind. It gives you more to chew on before you do or say something.
yeah. No, for real. Yeah, and and again, etymologies are rarely, not always, but I mean, sometimes they are, but rarely are etymologies like overtly apparent to speakers, native
Mhm.
speakers of the language. This is why there's people doing, funky historical linguistic stuff, like who are like, hey, like let's actually research this, because it is interesting how quickly a word just kind of means what it means and you don't know why. It's interesting how quickly
Mhm.
that happens. Like even newer words that are coined, sometimes if they enter the permanent lexicon of a language, people don't even stop to think about where they really come from. Like car, as in a shortening of carriage, motorized carriage. Nobody
Mhm.
really thinks about that in English.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
but that's actually what it's from, right?
yeah. Mhm.
And what is it, auto? And is it something like auto in Portuguese?
Carro, actually.
Oh, it's carro.
Automóvel is the complete word, but
Okay.
automóvel self moving.
Self-mobilizing.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah, the
yeah,
self-moving thing. Yeah. I
because it
mean, we
has an
don't,
engine, which makes
yeah,
sense.
because it has an engine. We don't think about that, right? We just think that's
Yeah,
the word for car. Yeah, it's the means what it means. Yeah, but why, right? Most people don't ask these questions. I do. That's why I got into doing what I do, is because I'm like,
yeah.
but I want to know actually
I really
why.
like
Why is it that way?
etymologies. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And again, none of these etymologies necessarily will probably not affect the way anyone views these words in terms of how they use them, but hopefully it does affect the way you view the words in terms of what they like, the history behind them, the metaphors behind them, because a lot of these words run on some kind of a metaphor of like there's poetry in the history
Yes,
of these
because it's
words
based
too.
on like simpler words. Like
Yeah,
I don't know the etymology for say, like saying something. There's got to be a word if there is no etymology. It just was the word for that when someone said it. That was the first mouth sound that stuck for that very basic act. And then you build up this is a very bad theory probably about language works. But then you build up to a word with a higher abstraction of like this is actually a mix of all these other basic things that we do. Like I know what smearing is and I know what blood
right.
is. I'm going to
Yeah,
smear blood on you to bless you. I'm going to call that blessing. You are
yeah.
now blessed.
Which means
Congratulations.
in the original sense, the original historical sense would be you're covered with blood or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
You're
I'm going to
blessed. You're
smear
like you
blood
got
on
blood
you.
on
We're
you.
going to
Yeah,
call that blessing.
yeah. Which also to be blessed, to bring it back to the old Germanic, pre-Christian Germanic stuff, to be blessed would be to be covered in blood, which would be to marked by one or multiple deities,
Mm-hmm.
marked as their follower, as their loyal person, but also as somebody who's going to receive benefits from that too. And so, I mean, that's also what I mean to bring. That's what baptism is. That's what Eucharist is.
Yep.
It's all. It's very. It's pagan originally, but it's a very sacramental idea, right? Of it's a.
Mm-hmm.
It implies physicality. It
Oh
implies a
yes.
physical medium of transfer. It's not just God will bless me and this like sort of abstract goodness
Yeah.
sense. It's like no. God will like bleed on you.
Yeah. God is going to open a wound and pour blood
Bleed
on
and
you.
blood, yeah, and we don't like that as moderns. We're like, ew,
Your blood is icky.
it's icky. Yeah, yeah. It's like, yes, yeah, I might get something from it. Yes, you will get something
Yeah.
from it, right?
Hopefully.
Like, yeah, hopefully that's the idea. Um, yeah, so man, we could go on and on and on, but I feel like
Oh
this is
yes.
probably a natural stopping point.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully people
Oh yeah.
watching at home
I
enjoyed
really
this.
like etymologies actually. Ever because some words in Portuguese like dialogue, we borrow from Greek like you Englishmen
Dialogos,
do. Yeah,
which
dialogos.
is to be like together in the logos, right?
Yeah, dialogos
Yeah.
and fru. Dia is similar to via in Latin. Maybe it was originally also from Greek, but it also reminds you me at least. I don't know if this is actual etymology. I forget. It's been years since I looked, but it's also fru or way or
Yeah, I
path,
believe
and
it
then
is.
logos
Yeah.
is both words and reason. And so it is to be together with words and reason, and it ties reason and words
But
together and a path through it. It's really
logos
cool.
is also the mediating sort of sense of being throughout
Yes.
the universe, right?
Hmm.
Which is also Christ. So like that is
Yeah.
so a dialogue
So in the post-Christian sense, it also ties three things
yeah,
together.
so a dialogue properly instantiated, I should say, properly instantiated. A dialogue is, yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, I mean, if you're speaking about things such as this, I mean, I don't want to claim, I don't want to presume, but I would say if you're speaking about things such as this, getting to the root meanings of words, connecting to them to broader mythological and or theological concepts, I mean, that is Christian. I think that is in a very Tolkien Lewis way of it is mythopoetic.
Hmm.
It's connecting words back
Yes.
to bigger meaning and then meaning back to words and words back to meaning and meaning back to words and the back and the forth and the back and the forth, which is in and of itself a dialogue. Um,
Hmm.
so it's all very it's all woo all the way
Hmm.
in the best of
Yep.
ways. Woo is not bad, right? Woo, everyone shies away from woo, but woo is good. Woo is good.
It was great.
Woo is great. I mean, this is what
Everyone likes woo. They just don't want
everyone
it to
likes
be
woo.
presented as woo.
Yeah, well,
I You can even see this recently. I remember there's an article by some like was a Catholic political writer, Sora Mari. He's like an American.
oh,
And there was a
him.
little bit of
Him. I will
yeah,
refrain from
yes.
commenting.
But Catholics I don't like him much either.
Okay,
And
good.
there was a there was actually an uproar because he did ayahuasca recently. I wrote an article about it. And there was an uproar because like, what the hell are you doing, you idiot? And the guys in the village were way more insistent he do the ritual than actually take the drug. They didn't care if he took the drug or not. And like, I would have already backed off at that point, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't even be there. But at that point, that's so okay. I am leaving. But then he describes like one of the people he was there with, which I believe was a Westerner, was like, I I'm gonna paraphrase, but it's basically like, no, man, you don't have to view it as spirits and shit. Think of it as energies and intelligences. Demystify it. I'm like, oh, whoa,
Those are
dude.
spirits. Those are literally spirits. Yeah.
That didn't demystify anything. That's
Yeah,
just a
yeah.
different word. It's like, no, you gotta demystify. It's not spirits. It's energies and intelligences. And you can all, go Rogan is also when he talks about DMT a bit of
Yeah.
LARP joke on this too. Whenever you see him and a guest talking about DMT, it's very much like, no, it's not. You're not necessarily seeing, the spirits or whatever. When a malevolent clown tells you to kill yourself, it's just like the bad energy of the world, man. And you're like, no, that was probably a demon, man. You were
But the
probably
bad
just
energy that's in the world is demons. I mean,
yeah,
I'm like, it's
exactly.
literally you're saying the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so like people don't like woo. People love woo. They don't love it being presented as woo, which is why they just change a word. They don't
Yeah.
even do that much work for it. They don't try
No,
to
they
like
don't work hard at it. Yeah.
yeah, they don't work hard at all. They just change a word.
Well,
That's
that's
it,
like
and then people are fine with
to
it.
bring it,
It's
at least
funny.
the little bit I saw it before I cringed out and couldn't handle it. The Dawkins Peterson thing. Dawkins just kept talking about memes. I'm like, those are myths. Those are actually myths. Those
Yes.
are just myths.
I
Memes are
God,
myths. Yeah,
Peterson
yeah,
could have like slam dunk. Is like, okay, I'm not going to talk
yeah,
about the archetype. I'm going to talk about the meme of the dragon. Does that
yeah,
work for you?
yeah.
I'm going to talk about the meme of the dragon as transferred
It
sociologically.
wouldn't have
Would that
worked
work
because
for you?
Dawkins would say, but that's not evolutionarily attested. And then it would have gone back to just, I mean,
Dude.
I think it's mental illness on the part of actually Dawkins. I think it's just mental illness. I'm like, I feel like
Have
he
you
just,
ever read how Dawkins got pwned by
yes, that's one of my favorite things
yeah,
that
it's
Yarvin
I
ever
actually
wrote.
think it's the best thing he wrote too.
Yeah, it is. It's very good.
It's
Yeah,
so good.
yeah.
And Dawkins pwned himself, really, is
I
like the
know
quick
it's a
intro.
self-pwn,
It's
and the thing is,
so
he
funny.
keeps on self-poning. I'm culturally Christian, but I hate everything about it. But we need to preserve it in England. I'm like, you got to pick one. It can't be both ways. Which one is it? You got to pick one. I want it both
Yeah, because
ways.
you either need to be a complete nihilist evolutionist, which is not necessary to believe in evolution at all. But you
Right,
need to be a complete nihilist in the sense of like, I don't care, like truth doesn't exist. Only what we can tell is what's adaptable or not. That's what our brains are wired for. And even this, which I'm saying, might not be true. It's
right,
just what's useful for me to say and believe.
right.
And even if that might not be true, and you can get
You
on
could
this complete regress. But Dawkins
utilitarian
doesn't
kind of
seem
thing. Yeah,
but even then, like you're gonna get into like an infinite regress of basically truth can't be real and utility can't be real because they can't be true. But this is useful. You're gonna get on this infinite regress, and some sophisticated guys who are like eliminativists do bite the bullet, and they're incredibly sad and depressed as a result. Uh, some philosophers, some of them are really good fantasy writers, like Scott Backer. He's completely nihilistic because he's like, we're doomed, we're all fucked. But his stories are fun because they put we're all doomed, we're fucked in a fun way. But Dawkins isn't even sophisticated enough to do that. It's like he
no,
still believes in this higher idea of truth while like being completely materialistic. I'm like, man, you can't really do that at
yeah.
all. That doesn't work. If you have any degree of sophistication, you have to
He's
see
not
there's a
sophisticated there.
massive
But this, I
problem
mean,
there.
so I didn't watch. I'm glad I saw the clip I saw. I think if people out there have a stronger stomach for that, I life is short. I'm in my 30s. I don't have time
I
to be
get too
wasting it
annoying.
listening
I
to,
get too annoyed. I get too
yeah, I get
annoyed.
too annoyed. I actually like I disagree with him on stuff. I really I still like Peterson. I think
I'm
I
fond
still
of him.
like him, but Dawkins, it confirmed so many things for me about Dawkins, and I was like, okay, like I don't need to listen to this, but if somebody out there has a stronger stomach than me or Bulge, check it out, or maybe
Mhm.
just check out I think it was Jordan Hall. If you follow him on Twitter, I recommend him. He's connected to he does stuff with Jonathan Pajot, Symbolic World stuff.
I may have seen him once or twice. I
Jordan
watched some
Hall
of his shows.
clipped it down to just, or somebody clipped it. Maybe it wasn't Jordan Hall. Somebody clipped it. Maybe it was Peterson's actual account clipped it down to just
Mhm.
the discussion of the dragon. That was pretty good. The I couldn't handle the rest of it. The dragon bit,
Mhm.
I was like, can we have just more dragons? Where are all that? It was just, I
Mhm.
think it was maybe only 5 minutes out of an hour and a half that was just dragons. The dragon part's great. Look into that. Dragons are nasty, very nasty. These dragons. Dragons will curse the shit out of you. So you got to be careful. Um, and yeah, I mean
I mean,
that's
Dawkins isn't even sophisticated enough to go on the, Christianity might not be true, but it's adaptive. It's
yeah,
clearly survived 2,000 years. That
Right.
I mean, that clearly speaks of something. I mean, I bet there's a bunch of causes that Dawkins has championed which won't survive 50 years,
Right.
which aren't adaptive at all, and probably even if they were picked up, would be maladaptive and lead to people suffering in some psychological or even actual physical way, or some
Yeah,
economic way, maybe. Like,
for sure.
maybe there's something, and Peterson is trying so hard
Yeah, he's
from
trying
the
so
clips
hard.
I've seen to communicate that very basic idea
Yeah,
of
of
like,
an
look,
archetype.
man, I'm trying to expand the scope of truth to like what's evolutionary useful as well, because there's got to be truth in this higher,
Yeah,
sense that it's like, true in the, the truth that belongs to God sort of way.
right.
In stuff that's maybe false but useful, because usefulness is something that exists, so it's
Right.
true to that extent at
Well, I
least.
think he was
And he's trying to
Peterson.
communicate this so
Peterson
hard.
was trying to communicate something that's truth as something that's real,
Uh-huh.
and I think it to me, this is just my opinion, that Dawkins, I think, is for somebody who claims to be care so much about the evolutionary record, is he's not worried about what's real. He doesn't care about what's real, at all. So that's just my one of my critiques. Like, you
I
don't
think
care.
he
You don't
cares
care
about
what's
what's
real.
very literally but even the word literal refers to words and not
Words. Yeah, yeah,
material. It's
yeah.
like even that
I
is
know.
woo. That's
It's
woo
it's all
too.
woo. Yeah, I know. It's yeah. In any case,
It's crazy to think about. Like I don't
yeah,
like this. Like he wrote some really fun books on biology. I really they are actually some fascinating works on evolutionary biology and those ideas. But man, this guy's kind of a dumbass.
yeah. He's only smart in one
He's
way.
so, yeah, in
Yeah,
one very specific and narrow field, and the
and
moment
like
he gets
people
out
who
of
are
that,
like most people who are like that, he's stupid in all other ways. And this is why I'm always, I guess that's a cautionary tale to people like me. I assume I'm an idiot unless I'm certain I know something. And that's, I try to be very careful about, and anyone who's watched this or anything else we've done, I try to be very careful about hedging my bets and and making claims that are appropriate, like sort of hedged and controlled in what I'm saying, because really I don't know a lot. I'm good at like two things. I don't know anything on other fields, and I think Dawkins doesn't have a. I'm not to claim that I'm super self-aware, but
he's
I don't
not
think
interested in other fields. If
he's
you
not
read
interested in
God
other fields.
Delusion, he's not
Yeah,
really interested in philosophy. Like
no,
several atheist philosophers came out and reviewed his book, and they're like, "This is like really bad." Like when he tries to take on like Saint Thomas's five ways, like he doesn't even understand. He is. It's not that his counter arguments to the five ways are bad. He doesn't even describe the five ways correctly. It's like they're just completely wrong from like a cursory reading. You don't even need to read the full account he does in the Summa Contra Gentiles. You can get the summary account he does in the Summa Theologica. It's like he didn't even read that properly, or like, oh, he's using a very specific set of terminology that scholastics used and inspired by Aristotle and Plato. And not Peterson, Dawkins is like not bothered at all. It's like, oh, maybe, I should learn those words. I should read some Aristotle, find out where Aquinas is getting this argument from, because he didn't invent most of the
right,
five ways. He certainly didn't invent the way of motion or the way of change.
yeah,
Uh, it's like that's from Aristotle. That's directly from Metaphysica and Physica. It's like, oh, maybe I should read Aristotle and try to. Where was Aristotle coming from? It's like, no, not interesting at all to him to read even like a
yeah,
pagan theist. It's like, no,
yeah,
that's actually really weird and interesting. I want to read the pagan theists. I would even read the pagan polytheists, although they didn't read. I don't know how much they left in terms of a philosophical record arguing for polytheism. Most of them, when they argue for like a supreme deity, like not the Socratics, the Stoics.
yeah,
Like Marcus Aurelius seemed to believe in the gods, but he
yeah,
didn't. He also seemed to believe in a higher god of the universe.
yeah.
Sometimes he referred to it as what's the Roman name for Zeus? I forget. Or is
Jupiter,
Zeus the Roman?
Deus Pater.
It would be Jupiter,
Well,
right?
yeah, which is from, yeah, it's like Deus Pater,
Yeah,
Jupiter.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Jupiter.
yeah,
Yeah,
which is
yeah, makes sense.
Father, the God,
I think
which is
he uses that in the
Father God.
meditations.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think he uses that in the meditations.
yeah,
I think Seneca and Epictetus does the same thing in the handbook. It's like, so and no interest in that tradition at all as well. It's so weird how uninterested some people are in the other stuff. Like actually I want to know more about the weird Hindu like philosophy. Like they're
yeah,
actually interesting to me. I've read some of them. It's almost impenetrable. But when I get something, I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I never
yeah,
viewed it that way, because Apparently, I remember when I did a course on it in University of Toronto, and there was this whole big thing between like several different schools of philosophy where they had like a debate about whether absences are real in some
Hmm.
sense, which actually echoes a lot of Aristotle and Platonic
Yeah,
arguments on both sides of it. And they're like, oh, that's a weird, interesting point of contact that they're like trying to figure. It's like, because you can notice an absence, even like you're walking down the street late at night and you don't notice any sound. It's like your hairs are up and you're like, I don't
yeah,
see anything, but that also worries me. With
yeah.
I perceive that there is nothing, but can I perceive something that isn't? You know, there's this whole
Right.
interesting argument about it. I'd say you can't.
Nothingness is following you.
Yeah, but that's an
Karl Barth's
interesting.
Karl Barth's Nichtige, nothing is following you. Yeah, that's the yeah, and many people, many fun
I need to read Barth.
many horror people have nothing is following you. No, no, no. Nothing
Nothing.
is following you. Nothing is following you.
Oh
Keep
yeah,
moving to
one of my
something.
favorite
Yeah. Yeah.
books as well is Past Master by R.A. Lafferty, uh, who's basically like an American. I genuinely believe he must have been a mystic at some level because this guy was insane. But he wrote a really fun science sci-fi author. Wrote Past Master, which is about St. Thomas More time traveling, to the
Oh
future.
wow.
He's like,
That's
there's
cool.
this society. I'll describe the premise briefly. There's this utopian society, but people are killing themselves, or they're choosing to live in slums in absolute poverty. They're like walking out of the city, and so they find the one person who had, and they go through all these politicians and leaders and figures like Napoleon or Churchill or whatever, and this society of these elders who are governing the city decide we're gonna bring the one guy with an honest moment, and when they pick up Thomas More, he says, well, other time travelers have been here. They're asking me why I spoke out against the king. And I'm pretty honest, I'm not planning to at the moment. I don't know why I did it, but sure, I'll go with you guys. And it's this really fun and weird adventure where he literally has an encounter. The villain who's driving all this, in a sense, the villain is also the utopia, if you haven't guessed it, is the Odeon, which I believe is the Greek word for nothing. And he has a
Yeah.
conversation with nothing, which is one of my favorite dialogues in fiction. It's
Well,
so
there's
great. Highly recommend that novel.
I'll have to check it out. There's a short story that springs to mind, written by the late great August Derleth, who's notable for
Ooh,
bringing
love
the
it.
works of H.P. Lovecraft to the masses. We wouldn't
Yes.
know who Lovecraft was without August Derleth, Arkham House
Mm-hmm.
Publishing. And by the way, a Lutheran. So even though I'm Anglican now, I got a hat tip to the Lutherans.
Mm-hmm.
August Derleth. August Derleth wrote a lot of his own stuff too, both within and without Lovecraft's world. One of his sort of, I guess it's not explicitly a mythos tale, but I highly recommend it for people out there, is The Lonesome Place. And it is
I'll look
about
that up.
what happens when quote unquote nothing is following you. And it's incredibly unnerving and it will freak you out if it will never look walking. It's one of these stories that makes walking at night kind of, yeah, like you were saying, like unnerving.
Mm-hmm.
It's only like seven, like at least in this edition, 7 pages long. Highly recommend it. It looks like it's been hosted online. I could probably even link it in the show notes. The Lonesome Place by August
Oh,
Derleth.
please do.
Incredibly,
There's also audiobooks on YouTube, apparently. It's like 38 minutes long.
yeah, it's pretty
It's like
short.
short.
Yeah, it's good. It's very good, and it also plays with this idea of what if there is no such thing as nothing, or what if nothing is something? I guess depending on how
Mm-hmm.
you want to view it philosophically, like yeah, like maybe nothing is something. Yeah, which is freaky, right?
I
We don't
mean,
like
but
it.
that idea is also played with in Faust. Mephistopheles says he is the spirit which negates all things. What is that if nothing,
Yeah,
in
and
a
I
way?
can
Or at
again,
least a hat tip to nothing,
yeah, and
to
again,
nothingness.
I'm a bad Germanicist because I actually have not read Faust,
I
because
haven't
it's not really
either.
my era. But yeah, yeah. But here's the thing about I like Goethe's poetry a lot. I've so here part of it is I read Sorrows of Young, where there delight
Sorrows of
is
Young
young,
Werther.
and I just was like, I can't abide this writing stuff. So good, my controversial opinion for the day too is that Goethe is an amazing poet and kind of a mid novelist, and that's
To
just
be
me.
fair, his plays, I have read that his plays are a very different style from Sorrows of Young Werther.
Okay, well,
Because
I'll
Sorrows
have
of
to give
Young
him a
Werther
second
is a
chance.
diary, right?
Yeah, and he's super
And it's
emo.
like first person.
It's super emo,
Yeah,
first
he's like
person,
taking
and
on a character, and if you
yeah,
don't like the character, it's like, ah, that's it's over. I don't
I
care
want to
how good
die.
a writer you are, if the character is like unbearable. Like it's like I like J.D. Salinger's Catcher in the Rye, but reading it as a teenager, I really think you should read it as a young man, not a teenager. As a teenager, like, fuck this dude, I don't care. It's like this dude sucks. He's dumb. Which is the point. He's like he has you dead to rights in a way. Salinger has teenagers dead to rights. But he's like, but as a teenager, like, no, screw this man. I don't care about him. He sucks. I don't want to know about him. But as a young man, you can sympathize and you can like him. Although even still, you might find him way too annoying to read. So
Yeah,
even if it's very well written, but it's a character you just can't vibe with, it's like it doesn't matter.
yeah. Well, we've talked about so many things, and that's fine. I had no
Mm-hmm.
strict plan, so this is this. Thank you for coming on. One thing
Very
I
happy.
guess that one to try to start wrapping it up. One thought that I did
Mm-hmm.
want to make sure I put out here before I forget, is that it's interesting. I was thinking about curse in particular, the English word curse, and how knocking off the path, and how sometimes being knocked off the path is bad, and sometimes being knocked off the path is apparently bad but actually good.
Mm-hmm.
And it's connected to this idea that I've been toying with, which is not unique to me. I've received this idea from somewhere else. I don't know exactly where, maybe an amalgam of different writers and thinkers, but that like all of God's curses are also kind of secret blessings.
Oh yes, I've actually had a weird like there's a few Mormons on Twitter like Extra Dead JCB, who have actually talked with or at least had a small Twitter exchange on this, and I was like surprised to find a point of agreement. It's like, yeah, the Tower of Babel falling down it wasn't a curse as in bad. It was like it's
Yeah.
actually good that God. This wasn't like God
As
punishing us for like
as
daring
Tolkien
to
would
climb
say,
to heaven.
O Felix peccatum Babel. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. It's because Tolkien's a great lover of language. So like I'm
Yes.
like, yeah, I'm also kind of glad we have different languages
Oh,
because it's
happy
fun.
sin.
Oh,
That may
happy.
Yeah, there's an old expression, I forget for which
No, I know, but
Christian writer it is. Yeah.
Tolkien's making a pun on that. Oh, Felix
Oh yeah,
peccatum Babel. Yeah,
Babel. Oh,
yeah.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah, of
oh,
course.
happy sin of Babel, because
Yeah.
of that we get a lot of different languages to learn.
Yes, yes.
That was Tolkien's thing. Yeah, it's like this is that great because now we can learn languages and it's more fun to have more than one language at your disposal.
And
So
it
yeah,
should be. Yeah, if there's a sense like, yeah, if everyone spoke the same language, that wouldn't be good. Because there'd be no different place. There would be nowhere to run to. Like if
yeah,
everywhere was the same culture, the same style of architecture, there's nowhere to leave. You can't.
yeah.
It's like It's almost like being trapped forever. It's like, oh, you can't just go over there at least even for a week or a vacation and then come back and feel refreshed or appreciate it again in a new light. It's like
Yeah.
no, it's the same everywhere, and you can't
Well,
escape it ever.
I,
That'd
this
be
is maybe
awful.
I've been toying with this idea too, and I'm probably going to properly bring it out for a Scarlet Thread Society episode at some point, but I'll put it out
Oh
here
yeah.
in kind of its rough draft form. Is I can't prove this. This is just a theory. I don't think it really changes anything, but it's me being poetic again, and Bulge will get on me about being poetic,
I
but like
like poetry. I'm just saying, in some matters of theology, you should be
okay,
autistic.
but okay. So like when in the book of Acts, when people are receiving the at Pentecost, people are receiving the
Hmm.
Holy Spirit, and right, everyone's like they're speaking in my language, they're speaking in my language, they're speaking in my language, they're speaking in my language. Everyone's like
Yeah.
everyone's like they're speaking in everyone's language simultaneously. How's this possible? And they're like they're drunk. No, they're not drunk. It's called the Holy Spirit, folks. This whole
Uh-huh.
story. My theory is, and I don't really think it changes the overall theology of what that text is about, but it's me being
Hmm.
poetic um, is that actually all of those people's quote unquote speaking in tongues are just speaking in the logos and it comes across as everyone's native language.
Hmm.
This is just my theory.
I
Are
mean,
they,
yeah, I think that might have been floated out before
has
in the
somebody floated
sense of
that before? It
I don't
struck
know
me
if
the
the
other day. I was like,
exact
I wonder if they're
idea,
just
but I
speaking in
think
the logos and
because there's been.
because
Go
they're
ahead.
speaking, there's essentially the Holy Spirit is letting them speak, if you will, as a metaphor, in logos or in Logosian. And
Uh-huh.
Logosian, if you speak it, will just appear as someone's native language to them. It will come
Hmm.
across as they'll hear a native language. That's why I was like, because why is everyone hearing a different language? Is it the disciples are speaking all these languages simultaneously? I was like, no, maybe they're just speaking in the logos and everyone's hearing it as their native language.
I
It's just an
think
idea.
I
It's
don't
just a
know if someone
theory.
exactly has floated this out before, but there have been wanderings. At least some theologists have speculated, like,
Yeah,
what language did Adam speak in the Garden of Eden? And I think
right.
someone has maybe tied that to were the guys at Pentecost speaking
Yeah,
that language. I think
yeah.
that's been speculated before. Maybe I don't know if like Lagosian or
That was just a
Godlian.
concept. That's just a meme, Lagosian, because I don't know what else to call it, right?
Yeah,
Like,
no, but it's silly. Like mentalese is a word in philosophy of mind for the words in your head, or at
oh my
least
gosh,
one school
really?
about
Is
it.
that really?
It's for the materialists, by the
I
way,
want
who
to
have a
jump out
very
a win.
specific
I
theory
mean,
of
I
mind.
want to like ram my head against the wall when I hear mentalese. I want to like
Yeah,
literally,
no, dude,
there's
it's
part of you,
bad.
if
It's
if you're
bad.
if you're a language person like me and somebody who loves poetry, you literally want to die. There's some part of you that wants to die because when you hear that, you're like, oh my gosh, mentalese. Because
Hmm.
people can't, yeah, I'm like, only
The
a
materialists aren't studying their
materialist.
best.
Oh, it's so bad. Yeah.
Mentalese is basically the idea that propositions in the mind before they come out as language have their own mental language, which is the same
Oh,
for everyone, which they kind of need to do for brain states to make sense, to like make
uh,
sense of propositions in a materialistic way.
well,
And it gets insane. But anyway,
they've
back to
they've
Adam's
clearly
language is one
misunderstood.
of the
As I, if
ideas.
anyone's listened to my most recent the John D episode I did, yes, I'm shilling it because we're trying to expand this channel. So go check out
Is it
Scarlet Thread.
STS or Wandering Humans? I need to know.
STS, as I did on a
Okay,
recent
I'll
STS.
check it out.
Uh, uh, Clearly the universal language is Enochian, not mentalese. It's got to be John D and Edward Kelly's Enochian. Clearly that's the
Uh-huh.
one. Clearly
That
that's
that
the
would also
universal
be
language.
interesting to speculate on. Was it Adam's language? Was it Lagosian? Was it
Well, but you
Enochian?
know, you have this bit too, right? Like from I think believe that's St. Paul, right? Yeah, like if I speak in the tongues of men and angels but have not love, this thing too, right? Like could
Hmm.
anyone ever really speak in the language of angels? I don't even know if that's possible. I don't even think that's what Paul's saying. But then Pentecostals will take that and run with it and saying we're speaking in angelese, and I'm like, I no, you're not. You're rolling around on the floor being weird. But yeah, you're not actually saying what you think you're saying. But yeah, no, it's but this is the theory that the you know people at Pentecost are just speaking in logos and it comes across
Hmm.
as all these languages simultaneously. Again, I don't think that's groundbreaking. I think it's just a fun theory. It doesn't change anything about the importance of the text. But it's a poetic, it's how I like to view it, okay?
It's
If
an
you'll
interesting like
allow me.
interpretation of how did it happen? It's like because everyone agrees, we all agree, every Christian agrees. I shouldn't say everyone. Every Christian agrees it
Yes,
happened.
it happened.
What were the mechanics of it? Like, 'cause every Christian agrees about atonement, and then we have like
Right,
100,000 different atonement theories. We're all like,
right,
okay, but how did it happen? Is
right.
basically the question, which
Yeah.
is it's free to speculate on
It's
because
a
we don't
speculative
really
point.
know until
I don't
Kingdom
know.
Come. We won't truly know.
Right.
But it's great to like think like, okay, what are the implications? If this speculation is right, what are interesting implications of this? What could
Well,
we think
because
about further on?
I I have it's connected to some ruminations I've had. Again, just purely theoretical, and
Hmm.
you should never try. You can't prove any of this stuff. Like in the new heaven and the new earth, how will people like? We know people will
How
talk to
people
each
speak.
other, but what will the speech be like? And I've like,
Hmm.
and I don't even know. But my theory is my poetic theory is that it will be simultaneously like all human languages, but also totally different, and it will be both
Oh,
someday. It'll be both.
yeah, it'll be completely transfigured in a way that we
Yeah.
can't
We
truly
can't.
expect, and that might be one way in which it
But it will
is.
also strike us as the best of human languages, and it will remind
Yeah.
us of something that like our languages strove towards and couldn't quite hit. This is my
Hmm.
theory. And so it's not that it's because like, you hear some cringy evangelicals like, well, we'll just be able to talk to everybody in heaven. I'm like, well, yeah, but have you thought about the implications of that? Right? Like, what is your native language going to be destroyed? That would be like alienating. No, like your native
Hmm.
language will be redeemed in such a way that everyone also has a redeemed native language. Like it's connected to this idea of speaking in logos. Just a theory I have. You're very
Hmm.
kind and listening to me spurg out about it.
No, I like it.
I don't think it's changes
Reminds me a lot of the
groundbreaking, but it's
style
fun.
of C.S. Lewis, I think, when he talks
Yeah,
about, or at least when there's a slight digressions on heaven in the space trilogy, where he does talk about the transfiguration of all things, which are
yeah,
very, very moving and very, very good. If
yeah.
you haven't read Space Trilogy, please read the Space Trilogy,
Highly
dear
recommend it.
listeners and
Yeah.
readers.
Me and Fred talked about that recently on our screw tip thing because we were talking about the difference between like, there's a redeemed and fallen version of each land, of each country, and you
Hmm.
strive to be the one and not the other, this kind of bit from
Hmm.
hideous strength. So anywho. Cool. Well, we'll talk forever, and I know people probably at some
Yes,
point want
and
to
we
go.
could.
And we could have a very happy Halloween. Have a very good All Saints and All Souls Day. Maybe go do remember some people who've passed
Mhm.
on. It doesn't have to be a sad thing exclusively. It should probably be a happy thing too, in a way. And yeah, don't eat too much candy, and check your candy for those razor
We
blades.
don't eat that much candy here on Halloween. We just
I
have the
know.
mass, really. It's a
Yeah,
little
see,
sad.
yeah, and you guys don't even have like a Dia de los Muertos equivalent, do you?
No, not really, no.
It's just
It's a little sad. It's really just they're kind of a religious thing, and
purely
they're
just
like
religious.
we're
Yeah.
aware of it because The Nightmare Before Christmas, another Halloween movie, is like Halloween.
Yeah.
So we know what it is for like the American culture, and they kind of like some places have tried it, but at the end of the day, it kind of becomes like it doesn't really catch on that much. So if it'll
Yeah.
be like some places try it and it stays for a while, then it dies off, and another place tries it.
Yeah.
It's just something like that.
Yeah, it's
It's
a
just
very
sad.
Anglo thing. It's very Anglo coded. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You have to kind of be in the northern hemisphere to really understand why it's happening this way. Because, like,
Also, it's summer
yeah,
where I'm not wearing a costume. You are in. I am going to die of as a little child, going to die of heat stroke on
it's so
the
hot. Yeah,
street.
I know. Yeah,
So you are not wearing costumes. You are crazy.
yeah, true. Although little kids in Phoenix, Arizona wear those costumes even if it's hot. I'll tell you
Ooh,
that. So
brave little kids. Brave
brave
little
little
kids.
kids. Cool. Well, yeah. So, Bulge, thank you for being part of the spooky season buildup. You've been on several spooky season episodes. Of course, if I'd love to keep having you on, but this sort of marks the Halloweenness of the epiphany of Halloween. But yeah, we'll keep having you on. Everyone out there, have a good again, happy Halloween. Do something
Happy
fun.
Halloween,
Yeah.
everyone.
All right. We'll shut up now. See you next time. All right.
Finally.
Bye.